And welcome back to part 4 of this series. If you haven't seen any of the other ones, I do recommend that you jump back in time and go and watch some of those other ones because it leads us to where we are today. As far as what we're doing in this one, we're taking our portfolio website and we're building out this part right here. This is probably the part where the layout is most interesting for me. Having overlapping sections is really cool and the grid makes it so easy to do. Now, most of the time that I'm doing my layouts, I do want to be using grid template areas. I think grid template areas are the bee's knees and they're really, really cool and they make it a lot easier. But in this case, because I have overlapping areas, it's not really going to work. So instead I'm going to use some grid line names. So yeah, this is what we're going to be doing. And this is the markup that I currently have. So the markup for this section is really, really simple. And it's because all I have is a picture, a little bit of text, and this box down here. The one thing that I like about this and using the grid to do it is I don't need a whole bunch of divs. All I need to have are there's just my image, there's my title, there's my H2, and I do have one div just to keep my paragraphs together. The funny thing with this is I'm not really sure a Flexbox fallback is going to work very well because of the way Flexbox works. Either everything in this whole area will fall into a column or will fall into a row. And it's because I can do this with a little bit less markup than I would if it was Flexbox. Because say I wanted 2 columns here, but then this to go underneath, but take up the full thing. And then I want that to change. I don't know if, I'm sure I could figure out a way to get it to work, but I actually think floats are going to be a better solution here. And I'm actually finding that sometimes floats are a nicer fallback than Flexbox, depending on the layout, of course. But I find the reduced markup that I'm using just leads to me sometimes finding floats work a little bit nicer, which is really funny because I thought I was done with floats. But yeah, that's interesting, I find. With that out of the way though, enough talking, let's actually get into coding this up. So I'm going to just move my design out of the way for now. And this is what we have right now. So I mentioned that we want to be using some grid line names, right? Okay, so let's go into my SCSS here and let's go into my partials and I'm going to make a new file called aboutme.scss with the underscore in front of it, of course. So in here, I don't have anything yet, but let's go to my all and whoops, let's just copy that line and paste. And this would be about me. And I'll save that, I'll close my all, and before I keep going, let's run my gulp build. Of course, this will open it in a new tab. And let's go, there we go, there it is. So I can close that down and let's just make sure it's working. Body, background is red. Yeah, good, okay. So I'm actually gonna start this video with the grid and then we're gonna go back the other way around and add in the fallback. So here I'm just gonna do an at supports. So if it supports the display grid, I want it to do a display, whoops, I want my about me to use display grid. I don't know why VS Code says that it's an unknown at rule. It thinks it's an SCSS rule. It's weird because at supports has been around for a long time. It's not widely used, but it's been around, but it still works. But you'll just see there's a few errors in here because it's getting a little confused about what's actually happening here. But it's all working, it's valid. Just to make sure it is really working, grid template columns 1FR 1FR. There we go. So I can see that everything is working even though it's in my at supports that VS Code doesn't really like right now, but that's okay. So there's my start. Now what I want to do is I want this to have pretty specific styling a little bit. I didn't put a container on here actually, and I don't want it to be touching the side. I sort of want a container. And I'm just trying to think. I'm gonna make a new file. No, am I? Let's just go look at my XD design again. That sort of wraps in there. This also gets it. Yeah, I need a container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in my modules. I'm going to make a new file called placeholders.scss. I think it's only going to have this one placeholder. So what my placeholders is going to have is this thing, and that symbol with Sass is the symbol for placeholder. It's the same whether you're doing Sass or CSS, and it's going to be called container. And what this is going to be is a let me think, width of say 90%, margin of 0 auto, and it probably should have a max width on it too, right? I'll say a max width of 1200 pixels. That might get changed. We'll save that, and I should load that into here. Copy, paste, import placeholders. Okay, so let's close that and close this. Now this, I don't use extend a lot, at extend. And the reason I don't use extend is it can be a little bit dangerous, but for things like placeholders, it can be super useful. And the placeholder only exists to extend something. The placeholder is doing nothing by itself. It's almost like a variable. It's something that's sitting there. It can be used. It's a little bit like a mix-in too, but just that can't accept arguments. So at extend container, save, and there you go. It's acting like a container. So the nice thing with this is I don't have to add anything to my markup. I can just extend this at any time I need it. So I'm going to use it there. I'm going to use it in here somewhere, and I'll also be using it in my contact form as well. But as I said, I don't need any extra markup. I don't need to add a container class somewhere in here. It's just being brought in through an extend, which I like to do. Okay, cool. And actually, that should be here. So I should do an about me at extend placeholder. Placeholder container. The reason I moved it out of my supports is because I just want that to always be there. I don't want it to only be for when the display, this thing is working. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to build in my columns. So I'm going to do a grid template columns, and we're going to use min max again. So we'll do a min max on here. I'm just trying to think. I have 3 columns. Let's just go look here at my design. I have one column. I'm going to have one column that's this space here. I'm going to have another column that is this space here. And then I'm going to have a third column that's just the leftover space here. So again, this empty space here is going to be my first column, and then this one's going to start right there, and that's how we're going to get this stuff to overlap. So to do that, I'm just trying to think of what my min-max values should be here. Minimum size, and again, this is like up to about the halfway point of, say, like, I'm going to say like 6M, which is almost 100 pixels, comma 1FR. Then we're going to have another one that's exactly the same. So I could actually do that too. No, I don't. I was going to do a repeat, but I want to put some names in here in a second. So there, and then my last one should just be the empty space. And the empty space, I don't want them to be equal. If we look here, if we look in the original design, like this entire space should be about equal to this entire space, but this is 2 columns. So if this is 1FR and 1FR, this one should be 2FR. So I'm just going to put a 2FR. I might need to change that to a min-max of 12 and then 2, but this might work. I think this is going to work better and give me a bit more room for my mobile type of stuff going on when I shrink my screen size down. I think this would be more flexible. So I'm going to save that. It's going to change things around a little bit. Now, I want to lay all of my items here out on my grid properly. So I can do that with the grid numbers, except the numbers, I don't like playing with the numbers. The numbers are a pain, and this is where the line names can be really, really useful. So I'm going to write the line names. So here, I'm going to call this just port start. So what that means is, like, the first line starts here. So the first line is my port start, and then this one in the middle is going to be, so it's port start is, and then I have this space. So I have port start, and then I have a space of, let's say, 1FR, and then I have another one here. So square brackets, and this will be my name start. because I want my name to be starting here. Then what we can do is, I'm just trying to think, do I need a name end? Am I going to call it name? That's the portfolio start, name start. Then we want this to be our image end, because our image is stopping. And then all the way at the end is the port end, because my portfolio starts here and ends all the way there. So portfolio end, and at the other end of it we have the portfolio start. Now if I save this, okay, so now let's come in here and add in my image, about image. My about image, I want this one to be a, let's just do my grid column first. So grid column is going to go from the port start to image end. And there we go, and it's working, so we can see it setting up too. Now I'm going to do an inspect on this. Firefox has a little bit better because you can toggle the grid on and off, but in Chrome now, if you hover over this, or if you're using your little inspector thing here, you can see that as long as I'm inspecting something that's in the grid or the parent grid item here, it highlights the grid for me so I can see what's going on. So I can see that that's going over the two columns like I want it to. Now one cool thing with this that I didn't show when I did my video on grid line names is they've built into the start and end naming conventions. So if I just do port over image, it's assuming it's port start over image end. So if I save that, it's going to be exactly the same, which is really cool. Now we're going to have to do a little bit more work on this, but I'm now going to do my about title. So my about title, we want this one to have a grid column of name over port, because I want to go from name start to port end. So let's save that. And oh my goodness, it doesn't go to the right spot. Why not? Well, what's happening is, let's bring up my grid there. So we can see that, can I not keep, that's where I wish I could keep it on, but if you look at it now, there's a row at the top, and then my Joe portfolio, the text there can't fit in the left, you know, it doesn't fit in there, so it's creating a new row for it. So you can see that there's an extra row, and then after Joe portfolio, there's another row where the other things are fitting in. But I can force things to be where I want them to be. So what I can say is on my about title that it's going to have a grid row. So I can tell it what row it should be on. Now I'm not going to create names for this one, I'm just going to use the numbers. So I want it to start at the first number 1, so number 1's right at the top. So start at 1, and I want it to end at the second line, which is this line right here. Line number 1 and end at line number 2. So start at 1, end at 2. Save. And let's get the same thing, copy that, and put it on my image. And now they're overlapping just like I wanted them to. Now the layout's not exactly what I wanted, so we can do a little bit more with this as well. Where do I want that? Let's just go look at, I want it pretty much down at the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is on my title, align self end, and that should pull it right down. This empty space that's coming up there right now, well, I already have my inspect on, about title, is the margin bottom. So my about title, I might also on here want to do just a margin of 0. Or actually maybe not 0, 0 is kind of close to the bottom, so let's do a margin bottom of, I don't know, 0.5 em. That looks a little better. And since we're here, let's just do this on the iPhone 5 to 100%. It's going right up to the edge, eh? And 2.5. How come if I make my margin, it is side scrolling a little bit. That looks a little better though. I'm gonna leave it for the moment. I might have to modify my font size a little bit on that. But let's just get the rest of it looking a little better. Let's just go back up to the iPhone 6 just so the layout's not busted, but we'll fix that in a second. Let's come in and fix this up down here now. So what do we want this to do? What do we want this to do? So let's get the subtitle and our text here working a little bit better. So let's come and do my about subtitle. Actually, my about subtitle, I want them both to just fill up all the empty space here, right? So about subtitle and my about text. These both are going to go grid column port over port. So it's port start over port end, and they'll just take up that whole space there. And my subtitle just will need a margin on the top a little bit. So about subtitle, margin top of 0.5 em. That looks good. Actually, let's just do a 0.5 em, 0. Top and bottom, no. Save. Top and bottom, left and right. Did I misspell it? No. Oh. 0.50. There we go. Just so it's centered in that space. And you know what? That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I am happy with that. Awesome, awesome, awesome. That's really good. Now, I do want to be able to fall back, and I'm actually wondering, like, this can stay here. This can stay here. My fallback, and actually, no, we're okay. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull a few of these things out of the at supports thing. So I have my about me, my about title, and my about subtitle. Actually, let's just take you and bring you up here, because it doesn't need to be in a media query, or a features query, I should say. This is okay, this is okay, that's grid, that's grid, that's grid, that's grid, that's grid, this isn't. So let's take you out and put you in here. There we go, save. I'm gonna leave anything that's dependent on the grid inside my feature query, and leave all of this out here, because I think it should be okay like that. Now, what I wanna do is, let's just turn off this. I'm going to comment it out for the second. But other than it being stuck to the top here, so that would be an easy enough fix. Margin top, let's just say it's 1em. So maybe a bit bigger than that. So we get down, we scroll, and we have a big picture with his name underneath. That's not so bad, right? So right away it is actually gracefully falling back a little bit. But as the screen size gets bigger now, it's not looking so good. And just so we can see what it would look like if we had the grid on, we do have to make a modification to it, but it's not like it's dying or anything. That's too wide. That's getting too big. But that's okay. We can fix that. So let's just go and try and think. When we get here, let's comment this back out. And this is where, like, if I wanted this to be here, and then I really think the easiest solution in this point is my about image. I really think that the easiest thing to do is to do a float left on this. Except I don't want it always floating left, do I? I might have to put that into a media query, actually. Yeah, because that doesn't look good. But the idea here is, like, here it looks okay. We need a space there, but here it looks okay. That doesn't look terrible. So here we do a margin left of, I don't know, 1em. No, not a margin left or margin right, sorry. Just to give us our space there. The text wraps around it like that now, which I think is fine. It's just this that we want to break. But I mean, yeah, this sort of sucks that there's one line of code down here, but it's a fallback. It doesn't need to be perfect, and it's only at a really sort of small screen range there. So if there's a few words here, could I add markup and make this all work? I could, but I'm more focused on the grid itself, and I don't want to be putting too much time. Most people, this is going to work fine on. So let's just build a media query into this at media min width of, I'm going to start with 40M and we'll see how that looks. One thing because people have used frameworks all the time, people get used to having to have it built in for specific things, but like you can come up with arbitrary breakpoints. Breakpoints should be used when your layout breaks, not when just like it's, oh, this is on this phone. No, who cares what phone it's on? Does the layout look good, you know? So right around here, there we go. Perfecto. There's a little weird. Yeah, let's just go up to like 45. That might be way too big actually. That's not terrible, but that looks okay. There we go. So when there's enough room, it jumps up, and that looks pretty good. And then that looks pretty good. Oh no! The dreaded floats. I never even thought about that. I haven't used a float in a while. One thing, this image is actually getting a little bit bigger than I want it to be too, though. Not that it's going to fix this problem, but there's two things before I fix my floating issue. A couple of things that I want to fix. My about image here. I'm gonna give it. I'm wondering. It's getting a little bigger than I want it to. So I'm actually. Let's just see. Let's give it a max height. 25M. Whoops, that's on the wrong thing. About image. It should just limit sort of the total size of my image a little bit more. And I might not actually run into this issue now because my text, this line length is way too big. I did a max width of 1200 pixels. That's not going to work for this. These lines are getting way too long. So I actually want to come and look at XD for a second here. And did I make this, just zoom out. So here it's clearly following the same container as everything else. Or even just my containers max width might just be a lot smaller. Okay, that's cool. So I think I'll just do that. In this case, my containers max width is gonna be a lot smaller. So let's go back over to my placeholders. I did this in pixels too. So let's get rid of the 1200, save that, and I'm gonna go with 55, which is close to 900 pixels. I just have to save this all one again to get it to compile. Okay, let's go look. That's more of this, that's not so hot. But that's more of what I wanted. I might even go a little bit narrower than that. I don't want to go too narrow, but let's just make this like 50 for now. Let's just see what 50 looks like. I do like that a little bit more. It also, I'm sort of cheating because it's solving my my float issue, but I'm looking at the length of the lines, and I don't want the lines to be too long. I also want it to be, if this text was longer, if you're using this for your site, you might have a lot longer of a text, which means I should definitely build a clear fix into this. I'm being lazy. I don't want to build a clear fix, but we can do one right here. Let's do another one. We call it clear fix, which is margin. Clear fix is the and after. Is this even gonna work? I think so. We'll find out. And after of whoops, that should be 2. My and after of content. I haven't done a clear fix in a long time, so forgive me if I'm trying to remember this. Content is nothing. Display is block, and clear is both. So let's just make sure this is going to work. And where am I going to put that? On my about me. We're extending that, and let's extend clear fix. And to see if it actually worked, I'm just going to look at my actual CSS here. Oh, because they're extends, they might be... That's kind of annoying, but whatever. About me after it is working. That's because of where this is getting imported in my CSS. I didn't think of that. I never even contemplated the fact that my extends would get brought in there. Oh well, I'm gonna leave it like that. Maybe that's something I could clean up at a later date. But that means at least my clear fix is working. So if you have a shorter text, it won't break your site. And if you have a longer text, everything does look good and the line lengths are nice and good. So hey, we can put our grid back on now, guys. So let's hit save. We're back with the grid. Not a big difference there right now, eh? Whoops. Undo, save. Like all we're doing pretty much is overlapping with that a little bit. So it's not a huge difference, but it's enough of one. And when we come back to fixing this for larger screen sizes, we're going to pull that up. We're going to pull some things in next to here. It's going to be a lot more interesting. I hope you liked this video. That's it for this one. If you did, and if you have any questions, just please leave them down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please let me know. If there's anything you would have done differently, also let me know. And until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.